ինչպես mainstream media-ն սուտ կխապե Միացյալ Նահանգներու նախագահության թեմ եւ նախագահի թեմ ընդհանրապես եւ ինչպես սուտ ռոպագանդներ գնեն որ տաբալեն եւ ասոնց ամենի յետևը կանգնած են խավարի ուժերը որ իսկական տաբալեն այդ ուժը որ գուզես Միացյալ Նահանգների ներսը շտկե եւ վերականգնեցնի ադուրամ այսչափ մեծ ռոպագանդներ կան եւ իմ հյուրերս ոչ թե conspiracy theory-ներ են, այլ շատ կարևոր անձնավորություններ են, որոնք կառավարական մարմիններու մեջ կաշխատեն եւ բարձր աստիճաններով հիմա պիտի զանոթացնեմ անգլերենով եւ որովհետեւ ամերիկացիներն իրենց հետ անգլերեն պիտի խոսենք եւ հույսով եմ որ բոլորդ կհասկանաք կամ աբակային գրնանք ասի YouTube-ի վրա title-ներով տնենք որ կարողանան մարդիկ որոնք որ հայ անգլերեն չգիտեն հայերեն կարդան Thank you all for coming, William Binney. Thank you for coming to our program to explain your expertise to our community, because we've been waiting for a long time to have a person on your caliber to explain. Our first guest, his name is William Binney. He's a U.S. intelligence officer and technical director of NSA. Our second guest is Dennies Speed, who's a LaRouche Pact intelligence, and he will be with us. And also I have our host. He's been out of town for 2 weeks on a business trip to Richmond, Virginia. His name is Matthew Giaba. Many of you know because he's going to run into office very soon again. So I will start explaining before I give my word to my guests. We see the current situation in the United States. Unfortunately, there is an attack to overthrow the presidency, not specifically the president that wants to fix the country. And in his inauguration speech, he specifically spoke against the powers and career politicians who have destroyed this country from the top to the bottom, incarcerated people, and infrastructure has been destroyed. Because of that, there is a major attack on this president because the globalists, the forces of the dark, however we want to call them, they don't want to see the country once again stand up, the America that we used to have a long time ago, and be able to help others and within itself help our generations. So I'm going to give my word, first of all, to Dennies Speed. Dennies Speed, you're online, and I would like to elaborate. I would like you to elaborate first. We talked about it, but I want your opinion, because his specific speech in the inauguration was he will fix the infrastructure of the country, and that's what he was to promise. And every time he speaks of that, we see mainstream media attacking him more because I guess they have a job security. And what's your opinion on that?
Well, I thank you, for example, for first of all, for having us on. Bedros, I'm very happy to be back. And I'd just like to say to the audience that the issue of President Trump is the issue of the presidency of the United States itself. You know, because he represents the institution, which is a constitutional institution that we are all sworn to protect and preserve and defend. And whether you consider yourself to be, as Mr. Binney is, a professional in that, or whether you consider yourself to be just an American citizen, it's, I think, incumbent upon everybody in this country that thinks of themselves as having a stake in the country to decide that the presidency of the United States is going to be preserved, protected, and defended under all costs. And you mentioned that President Trump has been very clear about this issue of rebuilding the country.
Right.
The trip he took to China was a good example of that. He saw things in China that he wanted to bring back here, and he's talked about the idea of employing millions of people to that effect. He said a lot of important things with respect to our American space program. But let's go back to his first speech, the one that he gave that inaugural day. Exactly. Remember that one of the things he said at the very end of that speech was that in 2026, 9 years from last year now, it'll be 8 years, will be the 250th anniversary of this country. The United States was started in 1776. In 2026 will be 250 years. And he said, what kind of country do you want to have in that anniversary? Do you want it to be the country we used to have? And I'll just point out to people that 50 years ago, back in 1968, we were just about to see Apollo 8, the first manned mission that went to orbit the moon at that time. And then a year later, we would land on the moon. And America was the most important and advanced industrial power in human history. And it took humanity someplace which humanity had never been. And that was the image and that was the vision of John Kennedy. People don't like to think about, or some people don't like to think about Donald Trump as being in the footsteps of John Kennedy. But he's been talking about returning man to space also. He wants to have a set of arrangements, or working arrangements with Russia, with China, and with other countries. This week, at the beginning of the week, the president of South Korea said he was happy about the fact that the president had helped him create a situation to negotiate with North Korea. And there were the talks that happened at the very beginning of the week that have resulted in the North Koreans going to the Olympics. You look at the situation with Syria and the fact that the president collaborated with Vladimir Putin in actually bringing ISIS basically to a position of defeat.
Right.
So if you start to look at the various things that are actually happening versus what the press is saying, you see a presidency that has been constantly besieged from day one. When the day two of the presidency, the president said he was going to get control over the intelligence agencies. And what happened was that Chuck Schumer of New York, I think about 4 days after the president said that, said the intelligence agencies have 6 ways to Sunday, okay, to go after you. In other words, meaning that no matter what you think you're doing, Mr. President, you don't run the country, the intelligence agencies do. So I'd just like to say that as a way of allowing you to introduce Mr. Binney, who I've had the honor to work with, at least in terms of helping him present his view.
Sure.
He'll tell you who he is. I mean, he's been 30 years at NSA, and he can tell you a lot of things about NSA. And as I want to tell your listeners and viewers, President Trump requested that Mr. Binney speak to the present director of the CIA, Mike Pompeo, and set Mike Pompeo straight on what really happened with the so-called Russia hack.
Exactly.
Which, in fact, never happened. And so, as I say, thanks for letting me be here, and I'd like to yield you and to Mr. Binney at the point.
So I would like to I would like to introduce Mr. Binney, who broke the first news about the Russian hacking, the false propaganda against Donald Trump. Thanks for having you on our program, Mr. Binney, and thanks for taking the opportunity to educate people about the truth, so we can all of a sudden get set free from all these media lies, liberal lies, that has been lying to all of us. So I will give you the floor to explain, if you may, the whole hacking system that is a false propaganda. It was to overthrow the president, to impeach the president. Who wants to fix this country? I'm giving you the floor.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me. First, I'd like to start last year in August, when they first started saying, in the mainstream media anyway, they started saying that the Russians were hacking the election, and they were tying it with Trump and his administration starting shortly after that. But initially in August, when I saw the first statements coming from them, I knew pretty much that they had no evidence whatsoever that they could use to prove that they were doing it, and this whole thing was being a manufactured issue that didn't really exist. And it wasn't until a few months later that we discovered some material from Guccifer 2 that came out alleging the hack of the DNC on the 5th of July 2016. And Guccifer 2 came out and said he actually did the hack, and he was working with the Russians. Well, when he posted the material, that was the list of all the amounts of data taken off, how many different files, when the files were taken off. That is, every file that's transferred is time-stamped at the end of the file, so that you can look at the series of files taken off the supposed DNC hack. This was the alleged hack. Then you could look at the timestamps of every file as it goes through, see the size of the file, so then you can calculate through the time period what the rate of transfer is, just from the material that Guccifer 2 issued. So what happened was, after that, we looked at, okay, all the time speeds through the thousands of files transferring over. They transferred roughly 16 gigabits, that's a lot of bits, over an 87-second period. Now, when you went through and calculated, the speed varied a little bit through the files, but when I went with Duncan Campbell recently through all those files, and we found that the highest speed of transfer was 49.1 megabytes per second. Now, that, according to the written reports that existed at the time, for transfer rates was not possible over the internet, just by the statements of companies that look at that kind of stuff. So we alleged at that point that it wasn't possible to do that, and eventually we had to set up a test of it. We had some hackers in Europe try to transfer that file or a file across the Atlantic over into Europe, in various places in Europe. Amsterdam and Belgrade and Albania and some other places in England. In our testing, the best we could do was 12.0 megabytes per second. That's roughly 1/4 the capacity necessary to transfer that data. What that simply means is we're trying to take water, like if I make an analogy here, it's trying to take water from a fire hose and push it through the faucet in your sink, and it just won't go. So what happens is it backs up and the whole thing fails. So that cannot be hacked. It's not a hack from anywhere across the Atlantic. So it could be transferred locally on a very high-speed local network, but that only goes so far. After that, you have to go across the main internet that connects the vast majority of people in the world, and it has to be transferred across the Atlantic. And those speeds are not attainable over those lines. So that clearly told us that that was false. Then later on, when we looked at the data, there was another set of data released, dated the 1st of September by Guccifer 2. Then when we looked at those two sets of files, and we saw that if you examined only the minutes, seconds, and milliseconds, those two files could be shuffled together like a deck of cards. In other words, they could merge to make one continuous file of data.
Right.
That told us that Guccifer 2 was actually playing with the data. And it wasn't real. This whole thing was becoming a fabricated event. That he was manufacturing, he was doing ripple changes on the hour and the date in certain files and moving them to do a second release. So when he did that, they say he's playing with the data even before it's downloaded. So in that sense, this whole thing has been proven technically to be a fabrication. And so this whole Russiagate is being fabricated, and they're trying to manufacture evidence, technical evidence, to try to justify it. And it's really a sloppy job on fabricating an event that didn't happen.
So my question would be, obviously there are forces who are trying to fabricate it, and for majority of the people who don't understand about data and about programmings, they wouldn't understand, they would believe what the mainstream media is saying, because they think mainstream media basically tells the truth. However, professionals like you who work for the NSA and on technical fields, you can detect and find out where the data was coming from, and fortunately you and a group of people like you were able to do it and inform the American public that there was no Russian hack and they didn't hack the system. President Trump was elected legally. However, these evil forces, DNC, I'm sorry to name them, one of them, or the career politicians or neocons, whatever we want to name them, they are on constant attacks. How can we educate our communities not to live in fear that the president really is trying to do, is not trying to harm the communities here?
Well, from my perspective, I just look and see what he's been doing and achieving since he's become the president.
Right.
I mean, he's really turning around the economy, and that's going to benefit everybody.
Absolutely.
That's going to be even a moneymaker for the U.S. government. And eventually, it's going to take some time to get there. But once the economy really starts rolling, that's going to bring in much more in the way of tax revenue. We saw that after Kennedy's and Reagan, when they did tax relief and so on. That stimulated the economy. The economy grew. Everybody benefited from it. So it's not just, and also the tax reform that's coming through, it's going to kick in here in February. I think that's going to make a big difference. People will see the difference there. So I'm more looking to see what people do and the results of what they do than what other people say about them and manufacture about them.
Obviously, you know Russians didn't hack the system because you worked with the NSA, and it's a professionalism that can detect. However, why were they trying to implement all these accusations under Trump? Was it on the part of the career politicians who were trying to undermine him and overthrow him? Can you elaborate on that, please?
Let me say one thing here, if I might, Bill. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Just to put this in, because of this question that you asked. There was a foreign power that actually, I believe, was involved, but it wasn't the Russians. Because if you look at what they are claiming, the issue concerning why they would have wanted to investigate the president, who was then a presidential candidate, was that they had been given a dossier, which came from a British intelligence agent, that is Christopher Steele, who was officially with MI6, British intelligence. He was retired supposedly, but he wrote the dossier. We now know from Representative Devin Nunes, he's the head of the House Intelligence Committee that's investigating all this. He says that the dossier was paid for by the DNC. So that the document that was being used to argue that the FBI ought to investigate President Trump as a candidate was paid for by the people that he was running against. So just to say, there is a foreign intelligence agency involved. There is going to be an investigation. The House Intelligence Committee is going after it. And it's going to have some pretty interesting implications. I mean, it would be bigger than Watergate, frankly, if this all came together. So I just wanted to interpolate that so people know that's the latest. That's what's actually happening as we speak. And we may see some things at the very beginning of next week and during next week, some revelations that are related to this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can agree with that, but I think fundamentally going in, both parties to a certain degree were afraid of what now President Trump was going to do, in the sense that if he really succeeded far beyond what they had done in the past, then it will make all politicians really look bad, because President Trump is not a career politician. This is the first, as far as I know, the political position he's held. So I think that they were grounded in fear of him making them look really bad as politicians. And I don't think that would be too terribly hard. But, you know, he's doing a good job of it.
Absolutely, but we need people to explain this, because the mainstream media, CNN, specifically CNN and MSNBC, they basically announce all this false propaganda, and they put people in fear. They play the immigration card, which was implemented by Obama, not Trump, actually. So they play the fear tactics until we heard yesterday the race card they played and the Hawaiian attack. You know, they keep blaming, and they keep obviously coming with false propaganda, because they're losing. Would you say they're losing on that? That's why they're coming with false propagandas.
Yeah, it's starting to be exposed with the FBI investigation, and now sooner or later they're going to have to investigate the FBI. Also the Department of Justice and NSA and CIA and their part in all of this. So yeah, I see this coming, and I see I see this as just the military intelligence, industrial intelligence complex, which I now call the Praetorian Guard, who are trying to determine who the emperor is and what the emperor does. They're gonna be put on the line, and I hope they get indicted as part of this process.
And you said the FBI, so could it, obviously FBI is involved in this. They're supposed to protect the Constitution, protect the public. Obviously they're involved in this fraudulent activity. Would you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, it's just like what they did with us. I mean, they even fabricated evidence against me to try to put me in jail for 35 years under the 1917 Espionage Act. But I caught them at it, and because I could prove that what they were doing was fabricated, they ran away, right? But the only reason I didn't get indicted was because I had the evidence against them, and so I threatened them with malicious prosecution. That's the only way they left me alone. So and they've done it the same thing with other people, like Elliot Spitzer, getting rid of him because he was going after the bankers for defrauding people for the 2007-2008 financial crisis. And they also went after the Tea Party using the IRS and the DEA and their access into NSA data. And they also went after the Jim Rosen, the Associated Press, to threaten the press. And this is all part of the DOJ, FBI, NSA, CIA connection. These are the same people who were involved in the Nixon administration, spying on U.S. citizens because they were opposing certain aspects of the administration's program, including the Vietnam War. And so they spied on them using NSA, CIA, and FBI. Again, the Minaret program at NSA, the Chaos program at CIA, and the COINTEL program at FBI. These are the three agencies, the main ones, that are participating in all this criminal activity, even against us and violation of our constitutional rights. This is fundamentally behind the doors. It's being committed as treason against the founding principles of our nation.
Absolutely.
In my view.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that was my view.
Yeah, absolutely. They're committing treason because they're supposed to protect the public, but unfortunately they're trying to destroy and lie and fabricate lies. But then they also arrest people if they lie. I don't want to go into those details, but most important thing is, unfortunately, you have been an NSA member or worked for the NSA, and there is obviously a war within the agencies. That's what it looks like. Some of them are working for the global elite or neocons, that career politicians who want to destroy this country, and some of them, like you, are really protecting the Constitution.
Yes, and that's, I think, why we still have some whistleblowers still coming out with information about that. So yeah, there's still a conflict even in the people who are working there. I know they're having a hard time retaining people now, and they're trying to solicit more people from different, from basically universities and around the country, and also hackers. They try to do that with the hackers, but I think they have acquired a reputation for what they've been doing in violation of our constitutional rights, that nobody really wants to work for people like that. And these people are basically circling the wagons, trying to defend themselves and defend each other. Like between the DOJ, the FBI, NSA, and CIA, they all have to cooperate and collaborate with each other. And I include, too, members of Congress who are part of the intelligence agency, the House and Senate Intelligence Committees. Those people know what's going on, and they know it's a violation of the Constitution. They're not stepping up and living up to their oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution. They should be doing that too. So I include them.
Absolutely. So I'm going to ask the question to Dennis, because it's very, very important also, this distraction that is taking place right now. We heard yesterday on the proclamation of President Trump, who was proclaiming that national holiday on Monday for Martin Luther King. And I heard in the news somebody called him racist. Would you elaborate on that, please, Dennis?
Yeah, well, here's what we know. We know that the country was caused to begin to debate during Thursday and all of yesterday, Friday,
Right.
whether or not the president had said some very specific things concerning the nation of Haiti, El Salvador, and various nations in Africa, the continent of Africa. And what was lost in the news report, what nobody heard, was that 3 days earlier he had proclaimed the existence of the first national park dedicated to Martin Luther King in the South, in Georgia. King comes from Atlanta, Georgia, and they have the Martin Luther King Center for Nonviolent Social Change in Atlanta. So what happened was that there was an area that was close to the King Center, and it became a national park. What's important here is that this was done at the request of John Lewis, who is a known avowed enemy of Donald Trump, but who had requested this, and the president thought it was a good idea because the president has expressed various times his admiration for Martin Luther King. So that happened on Monday or Tuesday. There was going to then be yesterday the normal proclamation that's made for the King birthday, which will be this coming Monday. That's his actual birthday, January 15th. But instead of us hearing that, what we were hearing was a dispute in which the president said he did not say something that Senator Dick Durbin asserts he did say.
Right.
And it's an obscenity, and we're not going to say it here. And my own view is that the issue, which we're going to see decided, is this. There was an earthquake in Haiti 8 years ago. It happened exactly 8 years ago yesterday. Mm-hmm. Maybe 250,000 to 300,000 people died. That wasn't the fault of the people in Haiti. Between 2010, when that occurred, and now, when the Obama administration was in office, for example, not very much was done. Many people left that island and they came to America. And what the issue is what are you going to do with Haiti? The president has a very specific good relationship with the nation of China. And the nation of China has said that they want to put $4.5 billion into rebuilding the central city of Haiti. The president may decide to take a page out of the book of Franklin Roosevelt, who back in 1934 lifted the American occupation of Haiti. The United States had occupied Haiti for almost 20 years. And President Roosevelt said, wait a minute, let's help these people, let's help develop the area. The president is about the idea of economic development, infrastructure development. And at the same time, he wants to address the immigration question. Haiti, the idea is that this is going to be over an 18-month period. He thinks that people, I think 50,000 people should return. Maybe that can be negotiated with the Haitians in the following way. And the president may decide that the crash rebuilding program, working together with China or anybody else that wants to work, and allowing the Haitians to do that themselves with American assistance, including Army Corps of Engineers, other things, that would then give us an actual solution on the immigration question of having people return to the island as part of the force of reconstruction. Mm-hmm. And I think the president might adopt this because a little known fact is that Frederick Douglass, whom the president has referred to, born in 1818, his 200th birthday, he was ambassador to Haiti. So one thing that could be done is to have this emergency reconstruction program of Haiti. The president could adopt this, and I don't think that he would have any problem doing such a thing. He was saying something concerning the fact that there has to be an American policy with respect to the issue of both immigration and reconstruction. So my view is that since he made these statements on infrastructure earlier, since he has a good relationship with China, since China is committed to this idea of reproduction, this is what we have to cause to be the focus. And I believe that the media intentionally shifted the focus over the past week, exactly because the other story of the whole week is that Representative Nunes of the House Intelligence Committee and other people have now forced the FBI to agree, and the Department of Justice to agree to turn over documents that are going to probably show that the dossier that was prepared around this Russiagate is a contrivance. If that happens, it means all the media, all the mainstream media in the United States misinformed the American public, did not do due diligence, did not attempt to remain impartial, and they have jeopardized, importantly, if you will, the well-being of the United States. There was a man by the name of Stephen Cohen. He's a Democrat, liberal, comes from New York. He's a professor at NYU, professor emeritus, who said, I'm about to lose my liberal card in the Democratic Party because I believe that the people that are attacking Donald Trump on Russiagate are a greater threat to national security than North Korea. And that just gives you an idea, you know, when you have people who are clearly opposed to the president politically saying, wait a minute, we've got to really call people to account here. And that was the real story of this week. Instead, the American people have been diverted into this other thing. Is Trump a racist or is he not? Did he say it or did he not? It becomes like a soap opera. And this is exactly what those of us who have the interest of the country at heart have to make sure we hold the people accountable. We have to hold the government accountable and the people accountable. We're not going to get off the subject. You lied to us around the question of Russia. You're lying to us to this moment. We're not going to tolerate it. You're threatening the presidency. And on that, all Americans have to come together and defend it.
By saying you're threatening the presidency, we're saying you're threatening the whole Constitution. Is that right? The whole country, not individual.
Well, yes, I am saying that. And on this, I'd like, if we could, to have Bill tell us a bit, because there's an area that we haven't touched on yet, which is the universal surveillance of the American people, which Bill knows all about, because he designed a system that would prevent violations and abuses, but at the same time would keep America completely safe from terrorism, even including the threat around 9/11. So I think that might be a good thing to put in here, Bill.
Yes, please let's hear from you, Mr. Binney.
Well, I think the upstream program is the program that's being really used by NSA to collect data across the whole inside the United States. There's about 80 to 100 tap points inside the country, inside the 48 states of the United States, the continental 48 states. And that's where they're collecting all of the data on the fiber lines. Now, they keep claiming, and this is an obvious lie, they keep claiming that all of the collection they're doing is to collect information on foreigners, to find foreigner threats or foreigner crimes or international crime or terrorism. But in fact, if you looked at the tap points that are part of the Edward Snowden material released on the Fairview program, especially, it makes it very clear the target is not foreigners, it's the United States citizens. Because in that, of those 100 or so tap points, only 11 of them run around along the edge of the coast of the United States. That's where all of the fiber lines come up across the Atlantic, across the Pacific. They surface at those points. Now, if they wanted foreigners, then all foreigner communications coming into or going out of the U.S. or going through the U.S., transiting to Canada, Mexico, or Asia, would be at those 11 points. The rest of it is the targeting is all against the United States citizens, because they've already got those 11 points tapped too, and they've got all these other tapping points getting U.S. citizens. There's no reason to be anywhere except at those 11. That's the obvious lie. Now, once they get that material, how they use it is even worse, because now the FBI and the Drug Enforcement Administration are using it to look at for crimes committed by U.S. citizens inside the country, common criminal crimes like drug smuggling or dope sales and things like that, or bank robberies or any kind of criminal activity. They're looking at all of this material to do that. And when they find it, they use it to go arrest people. It's called a parallel construction. This was exposed also in 2013 by Reuters, who did an article about it, showing how they used the material to arrest people initially, and then they had to fabricate evidence to substitute for the NSA data. This is the parallel construction part of it, and substitute that in a court of law, because the NSA collected data is not admissible. It wasn't collected under a warrant. So once they get the parallel construction, then they don't tell the court, the judge, the defending or the prosecuting attorneys, or even the defendant, what real evidence was used to arrest them to begin with. And so it's perjury. They're committing perjury in a court of law. And they're doing it, according to Senator Feinstein. This program has been so useful, they put hundreds of people in jail every year by its use. Now that's since 2001. That means there's thousands of people in jail based on lies and perjury by the U.S. government. And this is the Department of Justice policy of how they operate and use this data internally in the U.S. for crime and arresting and trying people in criminal court. This is a total subversion of the entire justice system of the United States. And they're violating their constitutional rights of these citizens. And in fact, in the case Amnesty International versus Clapper, where they were charging that they were doing this and using this material in a court of law, and not telling the defendant, who has the right to discovery, and challenging all the evidence used against them. But when they do that, the Solicitor General, because this case made it all the way to the Supreme Court, and in the arguments in the court, the Solicitor General of the United States lied to the court and told him that if anybody, if the NSA data was ever used against anybody in a court of law, that the defendant and his lawyers would be told, so they could have their constitutional rights, under the Sixth Amendment, to have due process and be able to challenge discovery of information used in a court of law against them. Well, that was never true, and so that was an outright lie. And so they used that to get the case thrown out of court. Now, if I were on the Supreme Court, what I would have done was reinstitute that case with prejudice against the United States government and issued a contempt citation against the U.S. government for fabricating evidence and lying in my court. They didn't do that. So they're not really helping at all.
So knowingly they didn't do that, basically, and the officials of the court, they know what's happening and they're not doing anything. That's basically it. Yeah, so because we see they breed on those that are poor, they breed on those that are incarcerated, because the money is in prison system and flow of drugs. So basically they want to arrest people and fabricate charges in order to recycle the money that they're making. It's just job security, or it's a big business. The whole system is running on a big business. And is there a way to stop that? Is there a way to reveal, just like you revealed the Russian gate was false propaganda to overthrow the president?
Well, I mean, we just have to keep talking about it, getting exposed, and taking them into courts of law, as many as we can, until we can find a court that will do the right thing. And when we get that exposed that way in a public forum like a court of law, then maybe the Supreme Court will start really looking at it and start doing the right thing at their level. So far, they have not been doing that. So, and of course, complaining and griping and groaning to your senators and representatives is always helpful too, sometimes. So it's a matter of doing an attack from multiple directions at the same time. I've also been trying to stimulate foreign governments to get up and oppose this, and actually to have lawsuits against the companies that are helping NSA and CIA and FBI do these things. And so most recent ones, we had the Supreme Court in Austria rule all of this bulk acquisition and collection was unconstitutional, and the Austrian Parliament, everybody except the conservatives have voted against this bill. So Austria, at least, is one of the first countries who is taking the right step and moving in the right direction.
That's we have a few phone calls. I want to hear from the public. Let's see what the public have questions. Yes, you're on the air. You're on the air. Hello. You're on the air. Okay, we're not going to get interfered by the phone calls because we're going to get phone calls and it's getting cut up for some reason. Let's continue. I'm sorry.
If I may check for a second, gentlemen, I'm so sorry. This is Matthew. So after listening to all of this, so we now understand as the general public that our justice system has been completely compromised and is now has been infiltrating the United States citizens on the privacy acts. There's no real privacy anymore in the United States. The FBI has been colluding, the CIA, DOJ, and so forth and so on, to overthrow this president, to overthrow the presidency, and compromise our Constitution. The main question from the public that I've been hearing personally, you know, how do we fight against these giants and how do we protect ourselves? But at the same time, they've lost all hope and faith in the justice system, all faith and hope in the election process per se, and as well as our elected officials. So people are more inclined into just, you know, staying in the shadows, going to their 9-to-5 jobs, and just being slaves. From any of you two gentlemen, do you have any way of telling the American people how they can stand up and rise, besides the obvious reasons we're doing now on this television show, is to kind of educate them, but how do we get them to start believing in our justice system again? Because it seems like the minorities, it seems like the poor people, the inner city people are being main targets for this situation, and they feel that they will be prosecuted for opening their mouths, basically. Do we have any idea how we can sort of give guidance to these poor folks out there who are been victims of this horrific crime that our government has been taking on them?
Well, I might say one thing about that. I think public meetings of the type of the old town hall meeting of a sizable quality, inviting people such as Bill or other members of an organization called Veterans Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, who are able to calmly lay out to people why the emperor has no clothes, why things they are being told are simply not true. Because these are professionals. Bill's a professional who knows that this is not an opinion. This is a forensic evaluation, and he can back it up in that way. That will give people confidence that they know what they're talking about. And I think that's rather important. It's also important for it to be seen as a nonpartisan issue. That is, it's fine if people have things to say about their support for the president as a person. It's also important to recognize that there are people that may oppose the president but have the moral obligation and political obligation to support the presidency, which I think is an important other element. And I think your third point, which is about the poor, let's think about the inner cities. There is a concept around infrastructure and around the creation of a new economic platform. The president has talked about it. Mr. Lyndon LaRouche, who's a political economist and founder of Executive Intelligence Review, we've always made the point, and make the point continually, there are sort of four measures. There's Glass-Steagall, bringing that back so that you separate out commercial banking from investment banking. There's issuing credit for these economic projects, kind of like the Apollo project when we did it. And there's a crash program approach. These are things that the people, particularly people who've been in the Army, in the military, and people associated with the Army Corps of Engineers, these people plus training programs for people in these areas to rebuild our economic might. I mean, that's what the president's talking about. The United States should be a mining, manufacturing, and agricultural giant again. And so I think the way we would give people the incentive to get back in the fight is that if we can successfully project the truth of what Bill is saying and others know, so that the people have the confidence, hey, listen, we got some people, we got some champions here who know what they're talking about, and we are the citizens. So we've got more power than anybody else has. And I think this is something we have the power to do.
Well, thank you for that. And in regards to Mr. Christopher Steele, you know, we used the word very loosely, Mr. In regards to his dossier and paid by the DNC to obtain this information, so-called, in regards to the Russian hack and supposedly that that Russia has damaging what's the word I'm looking for? Damaging information about Mr. Trump colluding with the Russian hack. Do we have any updates so far that there will be any treason filings on this? I mean, these people should be charged with treason because it's exactly what this is. This is a foreign country, a foreign intelligence officer from MI6 who has now demised and undercut the United States and undercut the presidency and basically fabricated all this, and the DNC is partially responsible for this. Do we have any indication that the Congressional Committee of House Intelligence are going to be filing charges on these people?
That will.
I'm going to say something very quick on that, right. And then maybe Bill or Bedros, you can pick it up.
Sure.
But Bill may have something that you might find interesting. See, Americans don't understand the relationship between ourselves and either British intelligence or other foreign intelligence agencies. And therefore, they, you know, this is what you said it is. This is treasonous activity. And Bill, I guess I just want to stop there. I think there is going to be motion to actually try to indict some people, but that remains to be seen. We'll have to see how far they go with that. But if you, Bill, might give people just a sense of how this sort of thing works, because I think the average American has no idea at all.
Right.
And maybe Mr. Binney has some answers on that?
Yeah. First, I think the House Intelligence Committee is moving to subpoena Steele to come in.
We lost Mr. Binney. We lost Mr. Binney. Let me go to the question until I reconnect him. 1 second.
Sure.
Ayo Rametsek? Ayo Rametsek?
Hello.
Ayo.
Hello. You have excellent program, Bedros, and excellent alternative information which we don't get in the main media. And they have very knowledgeable people. My question to them is that is there a conspiracy to bring this country down to its knees like 2008 or worse than that? And what is their interpretation? What's standing behind all this media propaganda against bringing this country down to its knees, if that is true?
Okay. I lost Mr. Binney. I'm going to try to reconnect him, but maybe Mr. Speed can answer that.
Sure, I can say something about that. The answer is yes. The idea is this: the president wants.
I got lost. I'm back now, I think.
Okay.
Oh, he's back. Very
right.
good.
Yeah, I'm back.
You want to take Bill first, and then I can take this up?
Yeah, Mr. Binney was explaining, and we got cut off. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
So
sir.
working since World War II, these the Five Eyes countries, the English-speaking countries, have been working against cryptology and cryptanalytic efforts and different problems worldwide, military codes, diplomatic codes, things like that. So it's has formed a very tight relationship between, for example, MI6, which is fundamentally the equivalent of CIA, and NSA and GCHQ, and the FBI and MI5. So those kinds of relationships have really been very close over the years since World War II, and it's only expanded since then on many different targets throughout the world. So it's a very close relationship, and it's and they share a lot. They share databases and data. So all that information is available to them all.
Okay. I want to announce, actually, on January 27th, we are going to hold a conference specifically on this issue, and I'm going to say in a few words in Armenian for the Armenians that don't understand English. Ես կուզեմ հայտարարել ամսի 27-ին պիտի ունենանք conference-ը այսպիսի հյուրերով, բարձր դասակարգի հյուրերով, որոնք intelligence agency-ներու հետ աշխատած են, որ բացատրեն ներքին խառնաշփոթությունը, որ մեր համայնքի մեջ վախ չլա, immigration-ի վախ չլա եւ չի հավատան այդ խոսքերուն, որ բարոն Թրամփը կամ նախագահ Թրամփը ուզե բոլորին վտարել այստեղ, այդ սուտ խոսքերը վերջացվի, որ մարդիկ իրենց կյանքը ապրին Միացյալ Նահանգներում մեջ, ինչպես որ գաբրեին եւ առաջ երթան բիզնեսի մեջ, կամ իրենց ընտանիքներու առանց վախի ապրին։ So այսպիսի անձնավորություններ պիտի լան այդ ժողովի մեջ ամսի 27-ին, ցեզի դեղը պիտի ասենք. So we are going to announce next week the place where it's going to be held and the time. On the 27th of January, we will have a conference and we will talk about how they want to overthrow President Trump and who are the powers. And the whole Russian hacking system was all false flag to jeopardize the individual that is not a career politician that wants to re-establish this country and make it strong to destroy the seat and basically the presidency. And I hope we are going to have guests from Mr. Speed, good speaker, so we can explain this. But until then, I have one phone call I have to take. Ayo Hrametsek? Hrametsek?
Alo, բարև։
Բարև ձեզ։
Կարող եմ չէ՞ խոսալ։
Այո, հրամեցեք։
Ալո, բարև ձեզ։
Այո, հրամեցեք։
Ուրեմն ես անգլերեն խոսալ չգիտեմ, դրա համար ձեզ եմ զանգահարել, այդ բոլոր ինֆորմեյշնը լրիվ իմ հեռախոսի մեջ է, թե նկարներով, թե իրանց ամեն ինչով, գրուպով իմ ամեն ինֆորմեյշնը վերցել են, ինչ-որ պրեզիդենտին սեքսուալ բաները, նկարները իմ
Եթե այս նյութի հետ գապ չունի, ինչ գիտնամ, ինչ կա քո հերացայինիդ մեջ, մենք ժամանակ չունենք այդ բաներուն։ We have, gentlemen, we have 2 minutes. We have 2 minutes to finish this. I mean, we're almost to the reach of the program. First, I'm going to give my word to Mr. Speed and then Mr. Binney and then Matthew. We each can talk 30 seconds to finish the program.
Okay, I'll just say the following. Yes, we do have an economic crisis that's impending. The president's concept of putting America to work, and I think he should even be talking about $1 trillion infrastructure program for this year, in conjunction with his relationship to China and Russia, can work. But it can't work as long as you keep trying to harass him and focus him and claim that he's a Russian agent. So taking this operation apart, as we are doing and as Mr. Binney and his associates are doing, is essential to the national security as well as the physical well-being of the United States.
Thank you very much. Mr. Binney?
I would just like to say that we, the people of the United States, have all the power. Our administrating government people, they simply are supposed to be doing what our bidding is and what we want done. In order to get that done, we have to threaten them, by saying, you know, the next time you're up for election, we're going to fire you if you don't do what you're told, and we're not going to support you with money. We'll support your opponents and oppose you every way we can. So that's the way to get them to do something.
Thank you for speaking out and explaining the real issue of the Russian gate to us, Mr. Binney. And Matthew, you're online. 30 seconds.
Wonderful. Thank you again, everybody, for being here and joining us. We'd like to tell the American people and that this country is under heavy attack. This is a complete coup to basically throw out the presidency. What we have to keep in mind is we are not too small to fight. The American population is a very large population that can all together stand up and fight this against this giant. The main important thing is, like these two gentlemen have said, is we have to keep informed and get the right news and find out the real questions. So January 27th, like Bedros said, is going to be a public forum. There's going to be a conference, a live conference where you can go and you can listen physically and actually talk and have all your questions answered and get the real information that you need as the American people. So God bless everybody.
Շնորհակալ ենք սիրելիներ, որ այսօր մեզ հետ միացաք։ Ես կուզեմ մեկ հայտարարություն մնել, ամսի 27-ին այս ամիս պիտի ունենանք այսպիսի բարձր ստացակարգի intelligent officer-ներ, որ բացատրեն ցեզ ինչ կգադարվի որ առանց վախի ապրի առաջինը, երկրորդը հիմնավորված է ամեն այդ լուրերը որ կան սուտ լուրերը որ կան։ Ուրեմն միջև քաշապատ մեմիևս պիտի խոսենք իրենց հետ եւ պիտի հայտարարենք այս հայտարարությունները եւ public forum-ը պիտի լա ամսի 27-ին բոլորը հրավիրված եք քաշապատ պիտի ասենք դեղը եւ ժամը։ Միջև քաշապատ ասված էր բոլորի հետ։
Հիվանդությունը կանխելու եւ բուժելու լավագույն միջոցն ու գրավականը նրա մասին ճշգրիտ պատկեր ունենալն է։ Ժամանակակից տեխնոլոգիաներին համապատասխան նորագույն սարքավորումներով Glenox Imaging Professional ախտորոշման կենտրոնում վկայագրված մասնագետների կողմից կատարվում են X-ray, bone density, CAT scan, ultrasound, MRI հետազոտությունները։ Քննության պատասխանները փոխանցվում են բժիշկին հաջորդ իսկ օրը։ Կենտրոնում ընդունվում են բոլոր